What is up, guys? It's Troy at the Full Setup, back with another video for you, and today we are finally getting around to doing some thermal scores. I'd also say it's a bit of a review as well of the Arctic Freezer 2 360 liquid cooler. Now, huge apologies obviously to subscribers that were waiting to see this video a few weeks ago, and also to Arctic that kindly sent it over. I haven't been looking after the back of my mouth very well, and the dentist I used to go to, which was very good, went back there and the service wasn't very good at all. So the work I was supposed to get done a few weeks ago hasn't happened. I've now got to get all the work done in February, and I've just been in a lot of pain and sort of painkillers, antibiotics. Didn't want to be on camera and stuff. Anyway, enough about all my life troubles. Back to the review. So yeah, the 360, well, the Arctic Freezer 2. Let's talk about the Arctic Freezer 2. When I first seen it, I was thinking, oh, please don't send it over. Don't send it over, because I didn't like the look of it at all. But I've been using it inside the case for like over a month now, and I must say I've become a good fan of it. And even though I didn't like the look of it originally, even before they sent it out, there was quite a few things of why I wanted to look at just the Freezer 2 series as a whole. Firstly, because it's available in 120, 240, 280 and 360mm sizes, so it's sizes for everyone. But the radiators, normally they're 25mm, the radiators on AIO liquid coolers, but Arctic use a 38mm, and they used a 38mm on the original freezer. But if I said I wasn't too keen on the look of this one, I definitely wasn't keen of just the Arctic cooling logo that was written on it. But it was a top performer, an absolute top performer. And there's lots of other tech as well that I was very interested. I think it's the first AIO that's got a PWM pump, so I was interested to see that. And it's also got a PWM VRM fan on it as well, which I think is probably going to be perfect for people who haven't got beefy VRMs. Maybe if you're running like an 8-core ryzen, you want to do a bit of overclocking, I think that might be perfect for you. And most importantly, the price as well. I think the 120 comes out at around about £40. You can pick both the 240 and the 280 up for between like £45 and £60. And the 360 is only £90 and comes with three pretty decent Arctic static pressure fans as well. So yeah, shall we take a little look at it? So here is today's test system then. So we've got the Deepcool MacCube. I think it's the 550, the biggest MacCube case. For all the testing as well, I'm just going to leave this in here because it doesn't really make much of a difference to the thermal scores of that being in there, and you'll see this in the case in a second. In the front we have two Noctua Industrials. Now these are 2000 RPM rated too, but we're only going to run these at 1000 RPM, and the back one is just the Chromax, which again will run at 1000 RPM, because I've always been this sort of person that if my CPU coolers are more than up to the task of keeping my CPU cool, then for all of my case fans I basically get them just that point where I can hear them, and I just back it down just a little bit. So that's what we'll be doing for this testing today. Now obviously comparing this to a stock cooler would just be, again, complete overkill. And to be honest, the stock coolers for AMD have always been very good, especially on Ryzen, but they are starting to show their weaknesses a little bit now. So the Ryzen 2600, you could do a little bit of overclocking with it. You could boost it just a touch. The 3600, you can't really even do it with. Now when you're under full load, as you'll see in a minute in IDA 64, it should run at about 4.1 gigahertz, but when you're in games it runs at like 4.2 gigahertz. So when it comes to overclocking, we're only going to be able to take this up to 4.3 gigahertz. That's as far as the CPU goes. Now I wanted to use the Arctic Freezer 34 eSports Duo, because obviously we're doing a bit of an Arctic based video. It looks gorgeous as well. And I just wanted to see how this performed, because this came out at about 82 degrees with the Ryzen 2600. And if I would say anything about this generation of Ryzen, is that it's running a little bit hotter. So I'd probably say all of my coolers seem to run about 5 or 10 degrees hotter. Now one thing I don't know if you'll be able to see there, because I've lost my lens with the frickin' zoom on it, I've actually got both of the fans plugged in separately. I haven't got them plugged in together, and for some strange reason, I mentioned this in my unboxing, on my Asus motherboards the PWM doesn't read correctly. So when I plug this one in, it reads at 3000 RPM. Now as you'll see from the sound scores and the temperature scores in a bit, you're going to know that these fans aren't running at 3000 RPM. When I plug it into my Gigabyte board and MSI boards, it's absolutely fine. So the way I'm going to base this review is I'm going to base it all on the percentage that the fans are running at, because the fan software on this doesn't set it to the RPM, it sets it to the percentage that it wants the fans to run at. So again, you'll see all of this in the sound scores. We can see is my one hand at the moment because my face is fat because of all the dental stuff. So yeah, it's a couple of people contacted me when I unboxed this a little bit worried. Don't be worried. Honestly, it runs absolutely fine. These fans aren't running at 3000 RPM for 1 second. I've got 3000 RPM notchers down there, and I know what those fans sound like, and I know what they spin like, and these certainly aren't. So yeah, I thought this would just be a good comparison. So we've got sort of their best liquid cooler, and so what I would say is probably one of the best budget air coolers on the market, especially if you don't want RGB. What else have we got in here as well? We've got an RTX 2060. What we're also going to do, we're going to do some ID64 benchmarks, but we're going to run 10 runs of Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Yeah, so probably do 10 runs to see what the temperature and thermal scores are. And we're using 3600 megahertz DDR4, 16 gigs of that. Although Crucial is sending me a 64 gigabyte kit. They said it pairs well with my Ryzen 3600. I thought that was a bit overkill, but hey. So I just thought I'd show you quickly. Hopefully it's got focus on it. And this is literally, it's not the motherboard, because Deep Cool stuff, Corsair stuff, Cooler Master stuff always reads it right. But you can see it says 1800 RPM at 0 and 3000 RPM at 100%. So, and it's odd, it does the same on the other cooler as well, but it's based on percentage really. If you actually do it by percentage, so if I just go to RPM fix mode, and then I can sort of set percentage, but we are going to use a fan curve. But the reason I wanted to do that is because I want to show you something. So the cooler is super easy to install, and when I did the installation video, I had the VRM fan upside down, and everyone sort of lost their shit a bit. But that's because I was sort of up quite high, leaning over a camera, and it basically needed like a 270 degree, I think a 270 degree rotation back the other way, because these were crossing over when I first installed it. The tubes were crossing over, and I'd rather have had the tubes not cross over, and it looked nice because my motherboard's got quite a tasty VRM on it anyway. And as you'll see in the Tomb Raider scores with both of the coolers, the VRM runs super cool on this motherboard. But obviously I did want it in the right way for the proper review video, because I know some of you would be interested in that. And this is actually probably quite a good point to make actually, and this isn't even a dig at Arctic, this is every liquid cooler or even CPU cooler on the market. You may want to check out an AM4 install before you go and buy it, especially if you're someone that has to have the logo in the right direction. And that is because Intel is a square socket, which means you can sort of put it anywhere you want. Any rotation, as long as your tubing can get down and your radiator is in the right place, it will fit fine. But with AMD, it's a rectangular shape, so you sort of only get 2 mounting positions, as where Intel you get 4 mounting positions. Now, like I said, it's a massive pro that it's super easy to install because it's all one cable. But for me, it's a definite con. And I know cons normally come at the end of the video, but I have to point this out because I know what I like to have, and I'm sure plenty of you like to have as well, is to have it separate. You know, you want your pump and your fans separate, and especially now we've got the VRM fan added as well, because when I turn this up, I don't know if you're going to be able to hear that on the camera. I might boost it a little bit. I don't want to boost it too much to annoy it, but at 75%, I can hear that little whine, and it annoys me. It annoys me, so I wish there was a way to turn it off. Now, to be honest, there isn't going to be a lot of times I'm pushing the fan speed to 75%, but still, I can hear the whine on it. If you were looking at doing big overclocking, that thing at 100%, let's crank it. Yeah, it's still there. The fans overtake it at 100%, but there's definitely a little whine there. It's something I notice more than having any other liquid coolers in there, so yeah, it's a little bit of a con. We need to do some benchmark scores. So we're going to start off with ID64. We're going to look at stock and overclock performance, even though there isn't a massive amount of headroom to have in there. But because this is a liquid cooler, we're going to run the test for an hour. Air coolers generally hit their sort of temperature after about 5 minutes. The pipes heat up on them and they sort of stay at that temperature. They hit their sort of max cooling efficiency that they're going to do very quickly. Liquid coolers on the other side, the water can obviously heat up inside it. So we want to do at least an hour. I know some of you have been requesting that because in other videos I only did half an hour. So you ask, you get. Okay, then it's time for some temperature scores. So we're running ID64, and as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be running this for an hour. You don't really need to do it with the air cooler, but you definitely need to do it with the liquid cooler. Now, my mouth is fully swelled up at the moment, so we're going to have to do this mostly by just screen recording. So I do apologise. I did want to make this a little bit more of an interactive video, maybe see a little bit more of my face. So just biggest apologies from me. But anyway, at stock settings, like I said, you'll see it running at that 4.1 gigahertz. In games, it will boost to 4.2. The voltage will run at about 1.35. You can reduce that voltage a little bit as well, but I decided to leave it to auto because, you know, it's sort of what most of you are gonna be getting at home. Now, as for the temperature scores, when it comes to the overclock settings, you're going to see this in a second. We're actually going to ignore the temperature in ID64. Well, we're not going to ignore it completely, but what we're going to focus on is T-die temperature. So as soon as we overclock it you'll see that there's a little bit of a difference in the temperatures, but what we need to be focusing on is the T-die. You might be seeing this in hardware info down in the lower right hand corner. So we've been running the Freezer 34 at stock settings just about an hour now, and the temperature is coming out at 70 degrees Celsius, but that is with a fan speed of only 75%. Now, as for the noise, take this with a little bit of a pinch of salt. So I had my sound meter position sort of facing towards like the logo on my monitor, so in the middle of my desk, sort of where I'm going to be sat, and that was coming out at 37.4 dB. Now, my sound meter also does zone, which is what Arctic like to use, so I thought we'd test zone as well, and that came out at 1.9 zone. Now, that's pretty good, 70 degrees, but we were only using 75% of the fan speed, so I decided, you know, what would happen if I cranked it up a little bit? And to be honest, there wasn't really a lot of point in doing that, so I cranked it up to 100% on the fan, and it only dropped the temperatures down to 68 degrees. It might go a little bit cooler, maybe if we let the CPU cooler cool down, but then again, like I said, CPU coolers, air coolers, heat up very quick anyway, so only at 68 degrees. Total system noise went up to 39.4 dB, and that's where dB can be a little bit funny in a way, because it was definitely louder than almost, you know, the 2 dB more than it was. And as for zone, it was 2.3 zone. So moving over to the Freezer 360, so we ran this for an hour and the temperature came out at 64 degrees. Again, we're using about 1.35 volts, and again, we're sort of sat around that 4.1 gigahertz. And I know what you're thinking, that's only 6 degrees less, Troy. This cooler costs 3 times the price. Well, guess what the fan speeds were running at? The fan speeds were running at 45%. But when it came to system dB noise, it was 36.2. So that's where the ambient noise in my house and living by street is coming into play. Because I'm telling you, the PC was silent. You're not going to think it's that much. What was it? It was, what, 1.2 dB less than the original, than the Freezer 34. So, and as for Sony, it came out at 1.8. So this, honestly, I've really enjoyed using this liquid cooler. It is so quiet. But what about when we overclock it then? Because with overclocking, we're going to add a lot more heat. Now, part of the reason why for a while we've said there's not really a lot of point in overclocking Ryzen. I mean, even really from going back to the second gen, like the 2600, there was a little bit of headroom, but I think now that like that headroom is sort of gone. That's why a lot of people are saying don't buy the X variants, because 4.1 gigahertz when we're at full load, so we can add 200 megahertz per core, so that is okay, but for that we have to add quite a bit of voltage. We actually have to take it up to 1.435 volts, but I use load line calibration set at level 1, so that sort of sits me around 1.4 volts. That's still a lot of voltage to put through a Ryzen CPU. Now the Arctic 360 is really good for that, but on an air cooler, I don't know if we could suggest using that for long term. I know a lot of people at home are probably pulling their hair out over it. So for the Freezer 34 overclocked, again, this is why I said we need to look at the T-die scores, and I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of the video, why I know the T-die temperature is the correct one, is coming out at 87 degrees, which is about right. Like I said, Ryzen 3600 runs a little bit hotter than my 2600, and the 2600 was about 82 degrees. Now for this, the fan speed we're running at 100%, and that was going at 39.6 dB, so with 39.4 before, so at least my sound meters sort of capture an accurate result. And for zone, again, we were at 2.3. Now, what about the Freezer 2 360? You know, obviously this should kill it, shouldn't it, when it comes to the overclocking? Big 360mm cooler, got liquid, shifting loads. Well, there is definitely some improvements here. So we managed to shave off 11 degrees, so that was at 76 degrees then, which again, you might think it doesn't seem like a huge temperature drop. You know, the cooler is 3 times the price. But the fan speed, this is where we come to the fan speed again. So the fan speed was running at 70% with total system noise of 37.2 dB, and we had 1.9 zone. So there's a massive amount of thermal headroom in there. We're only 75% of TJ max, and we're running at 70% of fan speed as well. So this cooler is definitely going to be perfect for some big core counts. But anyway, we need to look at the Tomb Raider results now. I'm just going to let that run. We're going to use the Shadow of the Tomb Raider benchmark. Now, what you're seeing on screen is the 10th run of each one. So on the left hand of the screen, we've got the Freezer 34, and on the right hand of the screen, we've got the Freezer 360. And there is also some dB measurements in there as well. And the RTX 2060 has just been left to auto, so that's running super quiet as well. so there were the scores then. Now, sorry, I did actually have a lot of the footage where it was sort of me on camera and taking you all through it, but by the end of it, I was looking quite tired and quite ill. This was a few weeks back, so you are going to notice that there was a couple of, like, the dates were different on the IDA 64. Normally I try and do them in the same day or within like 24 hours, but I did rerun, before I did the tests on the 360 cooler, I did rerun some scores on this quickly, just to make sure that, you know, there hasn't been like a seasonal temperature change. It has got a bit colder, but the scores were coming out exactly the same. So I want to just talk about this cooler just briefly first. Look at it. Look at it. Can you make a bigger one? Can you make like a slightly bigger one, like a 140 or a dual tower one, please? Okay, so yeah, the temperature scores on that. Now you're gonna think 85 is quite high. Was it 85, 86? You're gonna think that's quite high, but that's not really. That's sort of worst case scenario while you're using a program which is completely stressing everything. As you can see on Tomb Raider, it was fine, and I know that cooler quite well. I've had the black versions for like over probably 18 months now, the original one, before they refreshed it with the better mounting system. So I sort of know how that performs, and that's why I was saying in the screenshots from earlier, well, the screen recording, to focus on the T-die temperatures, because I know that this, when I had the black one with the Ryzen 2600, it was coming out about 82 degrees on IDA 64, and obviously I know, like I said earlier, the 3600 is running a bit hotter, about 5 degrees hotter, so with that takes us to 87, we're at 86, so that's why we were looking at the T-die. But yeah, I wouldn't be put off of buying that cooler. Like I said, I think you're better off spending money on very fast memory than very expensive coolers. Sorry, Arctic. That's just anyone that sent me an expensive cooler. It's just for Ryzen. So what do I think about the cooler then? The 360 AIO. What do I think? Oh, this is hard. I love the cooler. I absolutely love the cooler, but what you're gonna hear me make more criticisms about it than I am gonna say positive things about it here. You're gonna hear me sort of more to you, Arctic. I don't mean what I'm saying here, because I love this cooler. It's been in my case, and it's not just been in my case because I was late making the video. It's been in my case because I like having it in my case. Last year I did quite a lot of RGB builds, or maybe the last 18 months, but really when I first started the channel I always did white and black builds, and this just looks absolutely fantastic in the system. You know, it's very minimalist. Okay, so big pro on that. It's just it is gorgeous looking cooler. I just didn't think I would like that pump block. After seeing all these fancy RGB ones that I've been sent, I didn't think I'd like it, and I really do like it. Other pros as well, obviously the cooling performance. Okay, so we're only using a 6-core, and yes, you could say the temperatures were high at 75 degrees. That's not really that high for a processor. We can go up to 100 degrees. The fans were only running at 75%, so we're using 75% of the performance, and the thing was basically silent, so you know you can put bigger processors for it. And one thing as well, we were using an extreme amount of voltage there as well. We were going over the 1.4 volts. So as much as under a stress test it drops down to 1.4, when I'm actually gaming it goes over 1.4. This is again another reason why I don't like to leave it overclocked all the time. It's just, I don't think it's worth for the performance, but this cooler can shift that heat. So if I was going to leave it at that all the time, this would be the cooler I'd use. And then also if you've got Intel processors, if you do want that sort of really high frequency, even though I would recommend AMD as better value, if you still want that absolutely top frequency, if you were going to be dealing in those CPUs, you only need to put between 1.3 and 1.35 volts into those. This cooler is going to have your back. The installation, super slick, super easy installation. The one pin, plug it in, you're ready to go. Like, I've only put 4 screws in the back. I didn't want to put all 8 in. It's just, if I didn't have to do this on camera, that's such a quick install. And I'm happy to be back on liquid coolers. So before I was, what would I have been using? A Deepcool Assassin 3. Deepcool also sent over the Noctua because they wanted me to test it against it. And I did like those big air towers. I was surprised at the performance you could get out of those big air towers. But they were an absolute shitter for me to get out of the case. I actually scratched my RTX 2060. I'm gutted. I can see it as well. I know it's there. There's a scratch on the backplate. I'm going to have to get a new backplate for it. Taking the cooler out because they're so big, it's hard to get to the PCIe little, what's it called, the little latch. It's hard to get memory in and out. It's hard to get the fans in and out of it. This thing, just pop it in, you're good to go. And that's for someone who takes, if you take PCs apart a lot and you like to tinker, AIOs all the way, because it's so much more easier. I don't know what other pros. The price is really fantastically well priced. I think with this one being at £90 though, you're in danger of a little bit of stepping into you've got RGB territory then. So we'll talk about that in the cons, because that is obviously a con, hasn't got RGB, but priced is very well. Nice big thick radiator. Like the thing just, it feels premium. Do you know what I mean? Like EK recently announced their new AIO coolers, and I went straight over to our website. I wanted to know what radiator they're using. They're using a crappy little 25mm one, and I just didn't get it. Why is not EK? You know, they make some of the best radiators going. Why aren't they putting chunky ones with their AIOs? Arctic are. I think for everything you get, it's good value. But I've always said that about Arctic. It's always been good value. But that brings me over to cons, because good value and performance is, I suppose it's key, isn't it? But it's not everything. People like to build pretty looking PCs as well. You know, cons, lack of RGB. I know that's going to be a con for a lot of you. For anyone minimalist, this is the one to go for. That's a huge con. I really do think you need to step up and start making some RGB stuff. But you just do what you do, and you do it well. So that's how it is. But yeah, I think if I put this in a case, I would probably put some of those the EK Vader fans on it, Vader or Vardar fans on it, definitely, with the RGB. And even if you didn't want to do lots of RGB, I think, I said this in the unboxing, the two little grey strips that come down like this, either side of your VRM fan, you know, that could be RGB. I don't know what's underneath. You know, I didn't design it. Maybe it's completely full under there, but I think you could put RGB in there. Obviously, I didn't say that the VRM fan thing is a pro, but it's also a bit of a con. So it is a pro if you were using like an 8-core Ryzen CPU, maybe on like a B350 motherboard, B450, something that doesn't have a big load of VRM. I'm talking like a £70 motherboard. Then definitely that is where it comes up. But as soon as you start creeping up into these really expensive motherboards now, or just ones over like £250, they generally have really good fin stacks on them now for the VRM, or they have a big overkill VRM on it anyway, or they have passive cooling. And it does make a bit of noise. And you can't reduce the noise because you've only got one cable to plug it in. So it's a pro on the install, but it's a con because you've only got one cable. And I would like to see that changed. At the bare minimum, I would like it to be 2 cables. So you had the pump and the VRM fan hooked up to one cable, and then you could have the fans hooked up to another wire, put a PWM extension cable in the box, and you're good to go. I'm not going to give it a con for it not reading correctly on the Asus motherboard, because like I said, it still runs fine. I'm still getting, you've seen the sound meter tests. Oh, and as for the sound meter, it was literally just parked like here behind me pointing up, so that's where the sound meter was if anyone was interested. And yeah, that's the only con with me, but it is a big con for me, that single wire. And that could be personal. I'm gonna have to just not attack it anymore and say that's probably just a personal thing. That's just it's just annoying. It's just got my PC OCD going. We've all got things in computers we're OCD about, haven't we? Like, you know, some like me, I don't give a damn what the cables look in the back, but I know some people, Jesus, like Trev, man, everything it's got to be perfect, meticulous, and I don't care because it's around the back. But that's it. What would I like to see in revision then? If they released another one, definitely in white. If you make this cooler in white, send it out. Send me like, can you just send me like 100 of these as well? I want one of these to just look at all the time. I want one at my desk at work. I want some Virginas. Send loads of these over. Send them to my subscribers as well. Send that. But yeah, all in white. I think it would look lovely in white. It's always a bit hard though with the white tubing. You put it in the PC once, it's fine. Me, take them apart all the time. All my white cables, braided ones in there, are well dirty. But yeah, definitely in white. You already make the white fans to go with it. Definitely an RGB version. I'm not saying this should be RGB, but you could just release an RGB version of it that's like 20 quid more or something. Perfect. Call it a limited edition run as well. So then all the Arctic fanboys be like, I can only get one. You know? And yeah, just separate those cables. You know, if it was me, I'd like them all separate. I would like to control the VRM, the CPU block, and the case fans separate. You could say that gets a little bit messy, but it doesn't have to. I've got one cable coming out of the radiator that's hid around the back of my case. The other two, you could actually just wire them up together, put them in a bit of braiding, it splits off at the end. Bang. Control of everything. You can turn that VRM fan down. But yeah, like I said, I feel like I was going to make more complaints about it than what I said good about it, but I do love this cooler. I absolutely do love this CPU cooler, and I would recommend it to anyone. Absolutely anyone. If someone said, it hasn't got RGB, I'd be like, buy some RGB fans. It wouldn't make a difference. This cooler is it's the best. I think it's the best 360mm liquid cooler you can get. If you don't worry about how it looks, it certainly is. For the price, the performance, and the build quality is just, it is incredible. It just feels nice. It feels like a premium product. I'm not trying to say that Arctic is a cheap brand, but I've never seen them as being premium. And this to me feels like a real premium product, and you have done a fantastic job on it. Anyway, I feel like I've just been waffling and ranting for ages, and the mouth's starting to hurt a little bit more now. That's it from me today. If you like the video, leave a like. If you dislike the video, leave a dislike. If you've got any questions, leave it in the comment section below. Make sure you go check out the unboxing video as well if you want to have an up and closey look at it and a little install guide, and I'll be back with some more videos real soon.